I've always been a solitary person. It's not that I dislike people, but I find a kind of peace in true, profound silence that you just can't get in a city. My passion is astronomy. For my 30th birthday, I'd saved up and bought myself a serious telescope. A 12-inch Dobsonian. It was my baby. And to really use it, I needed to get away from the sky glow of San Diego. That's what brought me to the Anza-Borrego Desert State Park. Specifically, a place called the Borrego Sink. It's a low-lying, flat alkali bed, miles from any real roads, and it's famous among stargazers for having some of the darkest skies in the country. I made the trip on a Tuesday in October. I wanted to be out there for the peak of the Orionid meteor shower. I'd taken the whole week off work. My Jeep was loaded with my telescope, 2 heavy-duty marine batteries to run the tracking motor, a cot, a 0-degree sleeping bag, a cooler full of water and sandwiches, and a propane-powered heater just in case. I thought, completely over-prepared. I told my brother I'd be off-grid until Friday. He knew my general plan. The drive out was beautiful. The sun was setting as I turned off the main highway onto the long, winding dirt road. The mountains to the west were a deep, bruised purple. After another 45 minutes of bumping along a trail that was really just 2 ruts in the sand, my GPS finally announced I had arrived. I was in the middle of a massive, flat plain of cracked, pale dirt. There was literally nothing around me for miles. Not a tree, not a shrub, just the occasional skeleton of a dead ocotillo. It was perfect. The silence was immediate and heavy, like a blanket. The only sound was the ping, ping of my Jeep's engine cooling down. I got to work. Setting up the telescope is a ritual. I assembled the base, mounted the optical tube, and began the long, tedious process of collimating the mirrors. It took me about an hour. By the time I was done, the last sliver of sun was long gone, and the sky was a black velvet canvas so thick with stars it looked fake. The Milky Way was a brilliant, shimmering ribbon. I made a sandwich, cracked a soda, and settled into my observation chair, feeling completely, utterly at peace. For the first few hours, it was magical. I was logging my observations, spotting faint nebulae, and catching the bright green and white streaks of meteors every few minutes. The air was still and cool. Around 11:30 p.m., I was looking for the Andromeda Galaxy when I heard a sound. It was gravel crunching. I froze. The sound was distinct. Crunch, 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 like someone walking. I took my eye away from the telescope and scanned the darkness. I had a powerful headlamp and I switched it on. The beam cut a perfect white cone into the night. I swept it left then right. Nothing. Just the pale, cracked earth, shimmering with salt crystals. I turned it off, plunging myself back into darkness. I listened. The silence rushed back in, but it wasn't peaceful anymore. It felt occupied. I told myself it was an animal. A coyote. A bighorn sheep, maybe, though it was unlikely this far down on the flats. But the steps had sounded too heavy, too deliberate, too bipedal. I tried to shake it off. I was in the middle of nowhere. I was just tired, my ears playing tricks on me. I went back to the eyepiece. I spent another 30 minutes trying to focus, but my heart was pounding. Every tiny sound, the tick of the telescope's motor, the wind whistling past my ear, made me jump. Then I heard it again. This time it was different. It was a whistle. It was a low, tuneless sound. A simple 2-note whistle, like someone trying to call a dog. 3 feet. It came from my left, maybe 100 yards out. I ripped my headlamp on again. I spun around, sweeping the beam. Nothing. Again, absolutely nothing. Just the flat, empty expanse. Hello? I called out. My voice sounded thin and stupid. The only answer was the echo of my own voice, bouncing off some distant canyon wall. Now I was genuinely scared. I was miles from the highway. My Jeep was my only way out. I looked over at it, keys dangling from the ignition. I had this sudden, primal urge to just get in it and leave. But what about my telescope? My $1,000 setup? I couldn't just abandon it. Don't be an idiot, I told myself. It's just a prank. It's other campers. But I hadn't seen a single pair of headlights. I hadn't seen another soul since I left the main road. The whistle came again. 3 feet. This time from my right. It had moved. It had moved fast. My blood turned to ice. I grabbed the heaviest thing I could find, which was a large 12-volt battery. I stood up and just listened. For a long time there was nothing. Maybe 10-15 minutes. The silence was so loud it was ringing in my ears. I was starting to calm down. I was starting to believe I had imagined it. That's when I saw the light. It was far off to the north, right at the edge of the sink. It was a single, steady yellow light. Not a car headlight. It was too high off the ground and it wasn't moving. It looked like a lantern. A gas lantern. It was just sitting there, glowing in the pitch black. I stared at it, mesmerized. As I watched, it began to move. It wasn't driving. It was moving with a swaying side-to-side gait, like someone walking holding it, and it was coming toward me. I dropped the battery. I didn't care about the telescope anymore. I ran to the Jeep, ripped the keys out of the ignition, and jumped into the driver's seat. I slammed the door and fumbled with the key. My hands were shaking so badly it took me 3 tries to get it into the slot. The engine roared to life and my headlights flashed on, splitting the desert in two. The beam landed on it. It was about 80 yards away and it stopped walking the second the light hit it. It was a person. Or at least it was shaped like one. It was tall. Unbelievably tall, maybe 7 feet. And it was thin. Gaunt. It was wearing what looked like dark, tattered overalls with no shirt. Its skin was pale, almost gray in the headlights. It was holding an old-fashioned kerosene lantern in one hand, the one that had been casting the yellow glow. But the face, God, the face. It wasn't wearing a mask. It was smiling. A huge, wide, grotesque smile, all teeth. Its eyes were just black pits. We stared at each other for what felt like an eternity. It didn't move. It just stood there holding the lantern, smiling at me. Then it raised its other hand and it beckoned. A slow, curling motion with one long, dirty finger. "Come here," I screamed. I slammed the Jeep into reverse, cranked the wheel, and stomped on the gas. The tires spun on the loose dirt, spraying gravel everywhere. I got the Jeep pointed toward the dirt road and floored it. I didn't look in the rearview mirror, not at first. I was too busy trying not to crash, fishtailing on the sandy track. I was maybe a mile down the road when I risked a glance back. The lantern was still there, but it wasn't where I had left it. It was following me, and it was keeping pace. I was doing 40 on a road that should have been driven at 10, and this single yellow light was bobbing and weaving in my mirror, never getting closer but never getting farther away. I was sobbing, just completely hysterical. I kept my foot to the floor. The Jeep's suspension was screaming. I hit a washout and the Jeep went airborne for a second, slamming back down so hard my teeth clicked together. I looked in the mirror again. The light was gone. I didn't slow down. I drove like a madman for the next 40 minutes until I hit the paved highway. I pulled over, my whole body shaking so violently I couldn't grip the steering wheel. I just sat there, hyperventilating. I waited until the sun came up. I did not sleep. I never went back for my telescope. I couldn't. I reported it to the park rangers. I told them some story about a transient who had threatened me. The ranger just nodded, looking tired. He said, "Son, you shouldn't go out to the sink alone. We get reports." He wouldn't elaborate. I live in Ohio now. I sold the Jeep. I don't go out at night if I can help it, and I definitely don't look at the stars. I'm afraid I'll see a single yellow light swaying in the darkness and know that it's smiling at me. My girlfriend Sarah and I were in our early 20s, driving from her parents' place in Santa Fe back to our apartment in Los Angeles. This was about 8 years ago. We were in my beat-up 1999 Toyota Camry, a car that had seen better days but had never truly failed me. We were young, broke, and trying to make the drive in one straight shot to save money on a hotel. This was a bad idea from the start. We'd left Santa Fe way too late, around 2 p.m. By the time we were crossing the Arizona-California border, it was already well past midnight. Sarah was asleep in the passenger seat and I was chugging a warm Red Bull, fighting to keep my eyes open. The endless, dark ribbon of Interstate 40 was hypnotic. I saw a sign for a town called Amboy and an exit for historic Route 66. I'd always been a sucker for that kind of stuff, the old Americana. I looked at the map on my phone, which still had a weak signal. It looked like the old highway ran parallel to the interstate and would eventually reconnect with it near Barstow. In my sleep-deprived brain, I thought it's a shortcut, or at least it's more interesting. I took the exit. The moment the Camry's tires hit the old, cracked pavement of Route 66, I felt like I'd driven into a different world. The road was narrow, uneven, and there was nothing out there. No lights, no cars, no buildings. Just the glow of my headlights on the cracked asphalt and the vast, silent expanse of the Mojave Desert on either side. The silence was so complete that the rumble of my old engine sounded deafening. Sarah woke up as we hit a particularly bad pothole. "Where are we?" she mumbled, rubbing her eyes. "Old Route 66, I said, trying to sound confident. "A little detour. It'll be cool." She just grunted and looked out the window. "It's creepy, Ben. There's nothing out here. And I don't have any signal." I checked my own phone. She was right. The signal bar was empty. "It's fine," I said. "It meets back up with the 40 in like 60 miles. We can't get lost." We drove for another 30 minutes. The strangeness of the place was starting to get to me. The moonlight was bright, and it illuminated these strange, jagged rock formations and skeletal Joshua trees that looked like people standing in the distance, arms raised. I was starting to regret my interesting detour. That's when I saw the headlights in my rearview mirror. At first it was a relief. Another person. We weren't alone. The headlights were high and round like an old truck. They were far back, maybe a mile, but they were gaining on us. Fast. Good, Sarah said, noticing them too. Another human. I was driving the speed limit, about 55. The truck closed the distance in under a minute, its engine a low, guttural roar that I could feel more than hear. It pulled up right behind me, so close its high beams were flooding my cabin, blinding me through the rearview mirror. Geez, man, back off, I muttered, flicking my mirror to the night setting. I sped up to 60. The truck sped up with me, staying perfectly, aggressively glued to my bumper. Ben, what is he doing? Sarah's voice was tight with nerves. He's just an impatient jerk. He'll pass. But he didn't pass. The road was a straight shot for miles. He had every opportunity. He just stayed there, inches from my car. I tapped my brakes. Not a hard brake, just a flash of the lights. The truck didn't flinch. If anything, it seemed to get closer. My heart started to hammer. This wasn't just aggressive driving. This was a game. This was a threat. Ben, he's scaring me. Just pull over. Let him go by. I don't want to pull over, I said, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. There's nowhere to pull over. It's just sand. I decided to slow down. Maybe he'd get frustrated and just go around. I eased my foot off the gas, dropping to 50, then 45. The truck slowed down with me. It was like we were attached by a steel bar. The high beams were relentless. I couldn't see anything in front of me except the white-hot glare in my mirrors. Then the truck hit us. It wasn't a hard impact. It was a solid, metallic thud. The Camry shimmied and Sarah screamed. Oh my God, Ben. He hit us. I know. I stomped on the gas, pushing the old Toyota as fast as it would go. The engine whined, protesting as the speedometer climbed to 80, 85. The truck was right there with us, its engine roaring like a dragon. It hit us again. Thud. Harder this time. The back of the car fishtailed. I fought the wheel, trying to keep us on the narrow road. Call 911. I yelled. I have no service, Ben. I have nothing. Sarah was crying now, hunched over in her seat. The truck pulled out, finally, into the oncoming lane. But it didn't pass. It drew up alongside us. I glanced over. It was a massive, rusted-out flatbed, something from the 1970s with huge off-road tires. The passenger window was down. I couldn't see the driver. The cab was too dark, but I saw the passenger. It was a man, pale and thin. He was just staring at us. He had no expression. His face was blank. He just stared. Don't look at him, Sarah shrieked, covering her face. The man slowly raised his hand. He wasn't waving. He was holding something. It was a tire iron. He smashed it against Sarah's window. The glass didn't break. It was a glancing blow, but the sound was like a gunshot. Crack. I swerved hard to the left, ramming my car into the side of the truck. It was a stupid, desperate move. There was a horrible screech of metal on metal. The truck was too heavy. It just absorbed the impact, but it was enough to make the driver swerve. The truck veered off the road, its headlights cutting a wild arc into the desert. It plowed through the scrub, kicking up a massive cloud of dust. I didn't wait to see what happened. I kept my foot on the floor. I was doing 90 miles an hour on a road that was falling apart. I didn't care. I drove and drove, staring at the rearview mirror, waiting for those high, round headlights to reappear. They never did. We didn't speak for 10 minutes. The only sound was the wind rushing past the window and Sarah's quiet sobs. We finally saw the glow of the interstate up ahead. We merged onto I-40 and I didn't slow down until we were pulling into a brightly lit 24-hour gas station in Barstow. I got out of the car. My legs were jelly. The whole passenger side of the Camry was a long, deep scrape from the front fender to the back door. There were streaks of rust-colored paint embedded in my own. On the passenger window, there was a star-shaped fracture where the tire iron had hit. We called the police. A state trooper met us there. He took our report, but his expression was tired. You're lucky, he said. We tell people not to take that road at night. It's not safe. We get calls. Cars found abandoned. But we've never caught anyone. We stayed in a motel that night. We were too shaken to drive. We got the window replaced the next day and drove the rest of the way to LA in broad daylight, surrounded by other cars. I sold the Camry a few months later. I couldn't drive it without seeing that long red scrape down the side, without remembering the sound of the metal on the glass. Sarah and I broke up about a year later. The incident was part of it. I'd have nightmares. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, seeing that blank, pale face staring at me from the dark. I still drive that stretch of I-40 when I visit my folks, but I never, ever look at the exit for Route 66. I just keep my eyes on the road and pray the sun doesn't go down. I'm an urban explorer. Or at least I used to be. I'm a photographer by trade, and I've always been drawn to places that are being reclaimed by time. Factories, hospitals, old theaters. But my favorite places were always ghost towns. There's a special kind of melancholy in the desert. The dry air preserves things. Feels less like decay and more like waiting. My white whale was a town called Rhyolite. It's a famous ghost town just outside Death Valley. It was a gold rush boom town that died almost as fast as it was born. Now it's a collection of beautiful, skeletal ruins. The problem is it's too famous. It's a tourist spot. You go there on a Saturday and it's swarming with people taking selfies. I wanted the real Rhyolite. I wanted it empty. I planned my trip for a Wednesday in deep July. I knew it would be dangerously hot. I'm not stupid. I packed over 10 gallons of water in my SUV, along with survival gear, a satellite phone, and a first aid kit. I was prepared for the elements. I was not prepared for anything else. I got to the town just before sunrise. The heat was already oppressive, a physical weight, but the light was incredible. That low golden hour light hitting the ruins of the old bank building, it was a photographer's dream. And as I'd hoped, I had the entire town to myself. Not a single car in the parking area. Just me and the ghosts. I spent the first few hours in a state of flow. I was getting amazing shots. The bottle house, the old train depot, the skeletons of the general store. The silence was absolute. The only sound was the click of my shutter and the crunch of my boots on the gravel. Around 10 a.m., the heat was becoming brutal. I was already sweating through my shirt. I decided to explore the old Cook Bank building. It's the most famous ruin, a 3-story shell of concrete and rebar. The roof is gone, the windows are empty sockets. I was inside, framing a shot of a rusted-out safe when I heard it. A floorboard creaked. It was on the second floor. I froze. "Hello," I called out. My voice was soaked up by the thick, hot air. Silence. I rationalized it. It's an old building. The wind. An animal. A bird. But there was no wind. The air was dead. And the sound had been heavy. Like a boot stepping on a loose board. I grabbed the heavy-duty mag light from my camera bag. It's a solid piece of aluminum and it felt reassuring in my hand. "Is anyone up there?" I called louder this time. More silence. I stood there for a full minute, listening. Nothing. I shook my head, feeling foolish, and went back to my camera. But the spell was broken. I couldn't focus. The empty, black windows on the second and third floors felt like they were watching me. I decided to move on. I packed up my tripod and headed for a smaller cluster of buildings on the edge of town, the former residential area. Most were just foundations, but one house was still partially standing. It was a one-room shack, the wood warped and silvered by the sun. The front door was gone. I stood in the doorway, letting my eyes adjust to the gloom. The inside was a mess of rubble and sand. But in the far corner, there was something that didn't belong. It was a sleeping bag. A modern, dark green nylon sleeping bag, rolled up neatly and tied with a piece of twine. My heart did a little thump. I was not alone. Someone was squatting here. I was trespassing. "Hello," I said, my voice weak. "I'm sorry, I'm just taking pictures. I'll leave." No answer. I stepped inside, my boots crunching on the debris. Next to the sleeping bag was a small black fire ring. And next to that, a pile of bones. I knelt. They were small bones. Bird bones, maybe a rabbit. They were picked clean. A cold dread, completely at odds with the 110-degree heat, washed over me. This wasn't a tourist. This was someone living here, living rough. I backed out of the shack slowly. "Sorry," I whispered again to the empty air. I turned and looked back at the main town, back at the Cook Bank building a few hundred yards away. I felt it then, a prickle on the back of my neck, the unmistakable animal instinct of being watched. I raised my camera. I had a long telephoto lens on it. I zoomed in on the bank building, scanning the empty black windows. Second floor, nothing. Third floor, nothing. Then I saw it. In the one window I hadn't been able to see from inside. A face. It was just a pale shape in the darkness, but it was undeniably a face. It was motionless. It was staring right at me. I didn't lower the camera. I just stood there, frozen, staring back at it through my lens. We were in a silent standoff. Me in the blistering sun. It in the cool darkness of the ruin. I don't know how long I stood there. A minute? Felt like an hour. The face didn't move. Just watched. Finally, I got my legs to work. I lowered the camera, slung it over my shoulder, and started walking. Not running. I didn't want to trigger a chase. I just walked purposefully back toward my SUV. I did not look back. Every single step was agony. I was convinced I was going to feel a hand on my shoulder or hear running footsteps. I got to my car. The interior was like an oven, but I didn't care. I threw my bag in the back, jumped in, and slammed the lock button. I jammed the key in the ignition. That's when I saw the handprint. It was on the inside of my passenger side windshield. It was a greasy, filthy handprint pressed against the glass from the inside. I felt the air leave my lungs. I hadn't locked my car. It was a ghost town. Why would I lock my car? Someone had been in my car while I was off shooting. Someone had been in my car, gone through my things, and then had gone to the bank building to, what? To watch me? To wait for me? I looked at the back seat. It was empty. I looked at the cargo area. It was full of my gear, but it looked wrong. Rummaged through. I didn't wait. I started the engine and tore out of that parking lot, spraying gravel. As I sped away, I looked in my rearview mirror. A figure was standing in the middle of the road. A man. He was tall, incredibly thin, with long matted hair. He was wearing almost nothing, just a pair of tattered jeans. He was just standing there watching me go. He wasn't running. He wasn't waving. He was just watching. I drove all the way to Vegas before I stopped. I pulled into a casino parking garage, shaking, and I checked my car. Nothing was stolen. My water was there. My sat phone. My wallet, which I'd stupidly left in the console. Nothing was gone. Except for one thing. My first aid kit. It had been in the cargo area. It was gone. I thought about the handprint on the inside of the glass. I thought about the sleeping bag, the bones. I thought about the face in the window. He hadn't been watching me. He had been waiting for me. He had been in my car. He could have hidden in the back. He could have waited until I was deep in the desert, miles from anything. I got home and downloaded my photos. I found the one. The shot of the bank. I zoomed in on the window. It was blurry, distorted by the heat and the shadows. But it was there. A pale, gaunt face. And the eyes. Even in the pixels, I could see the eyes. They were dark and they were hollow and they were staring right at me. I deleted the entire set. I never posted them. I sold my telephoto lens. I haven't been back to a ghost town since. I stick to crowded city streets now. I'll take that over the silence. The silence is his. For a little over a year, I worked the graveyard shift at a travel center off Interstate 10 in Arizona. This place was an outpost. It was the only light for 30 miles in either direction. You'd get the occasional trucker filling up or a family on a road trip, but for the most part from 2 a.m. to 5 a.m., it was just me, the buzzing fluorescent lights, and the endless black desert surrounding us. The store itself was a glass box. The entire front was floor-to-ceiling windows. This was great for seeing customers arrive, but it also meant that when I was in there, I was on display. I was the only thing lit up for miles. I had a routine. I'd brew a pot of coffee, clean the machines, stock the coolers, and listen to a talk radio show about the paranormal. It was fitting given the location. The silence out there was so profound that when a car did pull in, the sound of its tires on the concrete was as loud as a gunshot. One night, a Tuesday, it was completely dead. I hadn't seen a car in over an hour. It was 3:15 a.m. I was in the back, checking inventory in the walk-in cooler, when the bell above the front door chimed. I jumped. I hadn't heard a car. I walked out to the front. There was no one there. The store was empty. I looked out at the pumps. They were empty too. Hello? I called out. Nothing. I figured it was the wind or the automatic door malfunctioning. I shrugged and went back to the register. I was trying to read a book, but I couldn't shake the feeling. I kept looking up at the door. At 3:30 a.m., a car pulled in. It was an old, beat-up sedan. Dark green or black, I couldn't tell. It was caked in dust. It didn't pull up to the pumps. It pulled into a parking spot at the darkest edge of the lot, far away from the overhead lights, and it just sat there. The engine cut out. The lights went off. This wasn't that unusual. Sometimes truckers or travelers would pull over to sleep for a bit, but they usually parked near the front or near the truck lanes where it was lit. This car was hiding. I watched it. I just stood at the register, pretending to wipe down the counter, and I watched that dark, silent car. It didn't move. No one got out. 10 minutes passed. I was getting seriously unnerved. I thought about calling my manager, but what would I say? There's a car parked? That's when the payphone rang. We had an old payphone on the outside wall of the store, a relic no one ever used. Rang. A loud, shrill digital burring made me jump a foot in the air. It rang 3 times, then stopped. I stared at it through the glass. Who would be calling a payphone in the middle of the desert at 3:40 a.m.? A minute later, it rang again. Burring, burring, burring. I was not supposed to answer it. It was outside. It wasn't my problem, but it was loud, and it was creepy. It stopped again. I looked at the dark car. Still nothing. It rang a 3rd time. This time it didn't stop. It just kept ringing and ringing, on and on. It was drilling into my skull. Finally, I snapped. I hit the lock button on the front door, a magnetic lock that sealed the store, and I went into the back office. The phone was a separate line. I picked up the receiver for the store's main line. I didn't have to dial. I just hit the intercom button. "This is the store manager," I said, my voice booming out over the pumps. "Stop calling the payphone or I'm calling the police." The ringing stopped. Instantly, I let out a breath. I felt stupid but also powerful. I had scared them off. I went back to the register, my heart still racing. I looked at the dark car. A door was open, the driver's side door, but no one was in it, and no one was standing by it. A new kind of terror, cold and sharp, hit me. Where did they go? I looked around the lot. I couldn't see anyone. I looked at the payphone. No one was there. I looked at the diesel pumps. I looked at the air compressor. Then I saw him. He wasn't by the car. He was standing at pump 6. Just standing there. He was tall and thin. He was wearing a dark hoodie, the hood pulled up, and baggy jeans. He was facing away from me toward the desert. "Hey," I yelled, though I knew he couldn't hear me through the glass. "You need to pay first." He didn't move. "Hey." He just stood there, motionless. I picked up the intercom microphone. "Sir? At pump 6? You need to come inside to pay if you want gas." He didn't react. It was like he hadn't heard me. I was getting angry now. "Sir, you can't just stand there. This is private property." He slowly turned around. He was wearing a mask. It was one of those cheap white plastic drama masks, the kind with the smiling face. Except this one was dirty. It was smudged with grime, and the smile had been painted over with a sloppy red downward grin, like a sad clown. The eye holes were just black, empty pits. He stared right at me, right through the glass. I dropped the microphone. It hit the counter with a thud, causing a feedback screech over the loudspeakers. He didn't flinch. He just tilted his head, like a dog. I grabbed my cell phone and dialed 911. I was hiding behind the counter, my back pressed against the cigarette rack, whispering to the dispatcher. "There's a man at my gas station. He's wearing a mask. He won't leave." The dispatcher asked for the address. As I was giving it to her, I peeked up over the counter. He was at the front door. He was standing right outside the glass, not 2 feet away from me. He was still wearing the mask. He was just staring. He had his hands in his hoodie pocket. I screamed and dropped the phone. The dispatcher was yelling, "Sir? Sir, are you there?" He just stood there. Then he raised one hand and he tapped on the glass. Tap, tap, tap. There was a light, almost polite sound. Tap, tap, tap. He tilted his head the other way. I was cowering, crying. I couldn't move. I was paralyzed. He tapped again. Then he pressed his masked face right up against the glass, fogging it. He was looking for the lock. He saw the magnetic lock at the top of the frame. He looked at it. Then he looked back at me, and he shook his head. A slow, disappointed no. He took a step back. He reached into his hoodie pocket and pulled something out. I flinched, thinking it was a gun. It was a squeegee, one of the ones from the cleaning buckets by the pumps. He started cleaning my window. He was just standing there in the dead of night, in that horrible mask, cleaning the glass he had just pressed his face against. Back and forth, a calm, methodical motion. I was losing my mind. The dispatcher was still yelling from my phone on the floor. He finished the window. He put the squeegee back in the bucket. He gave me a little wave, a tiny, jaunty wave. Then he walked, not ran, back to his car. He got in. He turned the lights on, and he drove away slowly back toward the interstate. The police showed up 20 minutes later. I was a wreck. They searched the area. They found nothing. The car was gone. The only evidence was the payphone receiver, which was dangling off the hook, and the perfectly clean front window. I quit the next day. I took a job in Phoenix in an office building surrounded by people. I still have nightmares about that mask, about the tap, tap, tap on the glass. I dream about the silence and the empty eye holes. I wonder what was in his other pocket, and I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't locked the door. This happened to my wife, Chloe, and me. We were, and still are, avid hikers. We're not weekend warriors, we're serious backpackers. We're talking GPS, emergency beacons, water purification systems. The whole 9 yards. We respect the wild, and we thought we were prepared for anything. We decided to tackle a remote, unmarked route in the high canyons of Utah. It was a multi-day trek through a region known for its slot canyons and difficult terrain. We had told our family our route and our expected return date. We parked our truck at the trailhead and set off on a clear, cool Thursday morning. The first day was incredible. The scenery was breathtaking. We were scrambling over red rock, squeezing through narrow canyons, and the only sounds were the wind and the scuttling of lizards. We felt like the only two people on Earth. We made camp in a sheltered alcove, made dinner, and watched the stars. It was perfect. The second day, things started to go wrong. The trail we were following, which was really just a series of small, stacked rock markers called cairns, started to become ambiguous. We'd come to a wide, open wash, and the cairns would just stop. We'd spend an hour fanning out, searching for the next marker. "This is weird," Chloe said, checking her GPS. "The topo map says the trail should be right here." The GPS was struggling. The high canyon walls were blocking the signal. It would place us, then jump half a mile, then freeze. "It's fine," I said, trying to stay calm. "We just follow the wash. It's heading in the right direction." We followed the dry riverbed for hours. The sun was high and the heat was bouncing off the canyon walls. We were drinking more water than we'd planned. By 4 p.m., it was clear we were not where we were supposed to be. The canyon, instead of opening up, was getting narrower and deeper. We were in a box canyon. A dead end. "Damn it," I said, throwing my pack down. We had to backtrack. We had lost half a day. We were frustrated and arguing. It was my fault for pushing us on, her fault for not checking the map sooner. It was the kind of stupid heat-of-the-moment fight you have when you're tired and scared. We had to make camp in a much more exposed spot than I would have liked, on a sandy bank in the main wash. We were both sullen. We ate our dehydrated meals in silence. The sun set and the temperature dropped like a stone. The desert goes from an oven to a freezer in an hour. We were in our tent, zipped into our sleeping bags, trying to get some sleep. The moon was almost full and it made the white canyon walls glow. It was so bright you could almost read by it. Around 1 a.m. I was jolted awake. Chloe was grabbing my arm, her nails digging into my skin. "Listen," she whispered. I listened. At first all I heard was the wind. Then I heard it. It was screaming. It was a high-pitched, human-sounding scream. It echoed off the canyon walls, making it impossible to tell where it was coming from. It sounded like a woman in terrible, agonizing pain. "Oh my God," Chloe whispered, her voice shaking. "Someone's hurt. A hiker. Maybe they fell." I grabbed my headlamp and my hiking poles. "Stay here," I said. "Lock the tent. Don't be an idiot, Mark. You can't go out there. It's too dark. You'll fall." It could be. The scream came again. This time it sounded different. It ended in a low, wet gurgle. We both froze. That wasn't a sound a person makes. What was that?" Chloe asked. "Mountain lion," I said, my voice not as steady as I wanted. "They can sound like a woman screaming. It's a mountain lion. It must have gotten a deer." We sat in the tent in the cold, listening. For a long time there was nothing, just the wind. I was starting to believe my own explanation. Then we heard the footsteps. They were heavy. Crunch, scrape, crunch. They were in the riverbed on the loose gravel. And they were wrong. It wasn't the 4-footed gait of a deer or a cat. It was 2-footed. Thud, thud, thud. Like a person. A very large person. It was walking slowly up the wash, toward our tent. I turned off my headlamp. We were in total darkness. I could hear my own heart in my ears. Chloe had her hand over her mouth. Crunch, scrape, crunch. It was getting closer. It was maybe 40 yards from our tent. It stopped. We held our breath. The silence was absolute. Then it sniffed. A loud, wet, snuffling sound. It was smelling the air. It was smelling us. It let out a sound. It wasn't the scream. It was a low, guttural laugh. A series of deep, wet huffs. Chloe started to cry, silently, tears just streaming down her face. It started walking again. Crunch, crunch. It was moving off the gravel onto the sand. It was coming right for the tent. I grabbed the one thing I had, a can of bear spray. I fumbled with the safety clip. We could hear it breathing. A ragged, wet sound right outside the thin nylon wall of the tent. It was sniffing the tent. It was so close I could smell it. It was a thick, coppery, rotten meat smell. It was overwhelming. It suddenly slapped the side of the tent. A huge, heavy, open-handed thwack that sent my hiking pole clattering. Chloe screamed, "Get out!" I roared and I grabbed my knife and slashed a hole in the back of the tent. I shoved her out. "Run. Just run." We scrambled out of the ruined tent into the moonlight. We just ran. We ran back the way we came, scrambling over boulders, falling, getting up. I didn't look back. I just heard it roaring behind us. It wasn't the scream. It was a deep, chest-rattling roar. We ran for our lives. We didn't stop. We ran for what must have been miles in the dark, fueled by pure, liquid adrenaline. My lungs were on fire. My legs were bleeding from a dozen cuts. We finally collapsed behind a massive boulder, miles down the canyon, sobbing and gasping for air. We waited. We waited for the sun to come up. We never heard it again. At dawn we walked. We left everything. Our packs, our tent, our food, our water purifier. Everything. We just walked. We followed the sun. We knew we had to get to lower ground. We were dehydrated and shocked. By some miracle, we stumbled onto a marked trail late that afternoon. We followed it for another 2 hours and found a road. A park ranger found us wandering, dazed, a few minutes later. We told him our story. He was a native man, looked like he'd worked there his whole life. He listened patiently. He didn't look surprised. When we were done, he just nodded. "You were in the Kanani Canyons?" he said, using a name I didn't know. "My grandfather told me, it's not a good place. He said you don't go there. He said, something lives there. Something old. Something that doesn't like visitors." He took us back to our truck. We drove straight to the nearest hospital. We were treated for dehydration and exposure. We don't hike anymore. We don't camp. I can't be in the wilderness. I can't stand the silence. Because in the silence, I can still hear it. I can hear the screaming, I can hear the footsteps, and I can hear that wet, ragged breathing right outside the tent.